I just want to, we're on the record?
We are, yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that, and I don't know if this will be a question for cross-examination, I want to make sure that Dr. Buffington heard the court's ruling with regard to specific acts of prior violence that I want to make sure that that's understood, that the state won't be asking for specific prior violent acts. And
More than the state heard it than the witness heard it, because the state's going to be the one asking the question.
Correct. I just don't want there to be an issue with this particular witness. We've already added it. The states said they're going to notify their witnesses, but I don't know how it's going to be asked on cross-examination. I just want to make sure that that's not an issue.
I don't anticipate any issues. All right, let's go ahead and bring the jury. And we are ready to proceed with the cross-examination of Dr. Buffington. Mr. Johnson, when you're ready, you can inquire. Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir. Good morning. Dr. Buffington, I want to start, I want to just kind of go back to your evaluation of the defendant that you did here at St. Johns County Jail. Okay. Yes, sir. When did you say you did that again?
That was on April 4th.
Of this year?
April 5th.
Of this year, correct?
Yes, sir.
So I want to kind of walk through this step by step. And just to be clear, this is what the defendant told you. He recalled his experiences from the night of August the 26th through August the 27th, up and through the time of the murders, and then beyond that, correct?
Yes, sir. That's my recollection from the interview.
So as I understand from, and you indicated, I think early on, that it was important to speak to the defendant and to find out what his experiences were, so you can develop an opinion as to exactly what kind of effect these drugs may have had on him, correct?
Correct. Prescription drugs.
The drugs themselves the prescription bottles, the pharmacy records, the medical records, those would not have given you indication of what effect, if any of these drugs may have had on him, correct?
I don't know that I would phrase it that way. I could make great assumptions on what effects the drugs will have, but not with great granularity on what did transpire.
Okay, fair enough. So let's talk about what he told you. As I understand, and that he told you that the night before he was at home, correct?
That's correct.
And while he's at home, he attempts to make contact with his wife. During that time, she tells him that she's not feeling well, correct?
That's correct.
Then thereafter, sometime, I guess around 10 o'clock or so, if I get any details wrong, I told you, correct me. But sometime at 10 o'clock or so, he gets contacted by his friend Daryl and invited to go out with him, correct?
Correct. I don't know whether to the minute is accurate.
Okay, fair enough. So he goes to meet with Daryl, and they go to a couple of bars, correct?
Correct.
And they have some drinks, correct?
That's correct.
And how many drinks did you say that he consumed while he was with Daryl?
My recollection from the interview was 2 to 3, and they were crowd rolling.
Okay. And you indicated that he also told you that he did a line of what he believed to be cocaine, correct?
Correct. It was something acquired by Daryl from a friend that evening at the location.
Okay.
At the bar.
Is it your opinion, Dr. Buffington, that neither the drinks that he had with Daryl nor the cocaine would have had any impact on him at 10:30 or so the next morning?
They would not have induced any intoxication. So you would not expect alcohol intoxication, and you would not expect cocaine pharmacologic effect at that time. The disruption on the neurotransmitters possibly, but not intoxication.
Okay. Well, let me phrase the question a little bit differently, or maybe preface the question a little bit. Assuming that the one line he did was actually the cocaine, pharmacologically speaking, and I'm not even sure that's a real word. You can correct me if it's not. But from that aspect, how long would that have had an impact on his system? How long would he have been feeling the effects from that one line of cocaine?
Yes, sir. Approximately an hour and a half. So when you look at each substance, we look at when their effect starts, how long the pharmacologic effect lasts. And then we look at a whole separate series of characteristics, like how long can you detect it in blood, in urine. So the pharmacologic effects of cocaine are outwards of an hour and a half.
Okay. So hour and a half, in terms of the pharmacological effect, it would have passed, correct?
That's correct.
And then the alcohol, the 2 or 3 drinks of Crown Royal, how long would that have been in his system from a pharmacological standpoint?
Only a few hours. So if those were pre-midnight, by the time he even had the cocaine, those were diminished.
Okay. So he does the cocaine, he does the alcohol, and then he leaves Daryl around 3 a.m., is that correct?
3 or 3:30.
Okay. And then he returns to his house where he was staying?
Yes, sir.
Oh, he
My
goes
understanding is that on the way to go back to his sister's home, that he went to check on Amanda because that residence was in close proximity.
Okay. So from leaving Daryl's, he goes directly to Amanda Colley's residence, correct?
That was my understanding.
Okay. So he goes there. Did he ever tell you where he parked?
At that juncture, no. I don't recall that in the discussion.
Okay. So he goes into the home, is that correct?
That's correct.
I think you indicated that he used the clicker and went in through the garage, correct?
Correct. He still had access to it.
And he goes into the house, he's looking around, he finds the sexual paraphernalia and some items within the home, is that correct?
That's correct.
And those items that he found made him angry, correct?
I assume so. I assume it would anyway.
Well, he told you that finding those items made him angry, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so he actually told you he took those items, correct?
I don't recall if he took them from the house.
Okay. So he, after finding the items, getting angry, he then leaves and he goes to his friend Mike Dickens, who is a neighbor, correct?
That's correct. And as I stated before, I don't know whether it's one house or 2 houses, but it's in very close proximity.
Okay. He goes, and this was approximately 4 or so in the morning, is that correct?
Late 3s or 4 o'clock a.m.
Okay. He talks with Mike Dickens. He has a beer at Mike Dickens, correct?
Yes, sir.
At that particular time of the morning, would that beer how long would that beer have been in his system, having a pharmacological effect from that point forward?
Again, probably 2 to 3 hours max, and it would diminish quickly. Single beer is not even going to register you on intoxication.
Okay. So he's at Mike Dickens, and then he returns home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then he told you that he knew that he had court the next morning, correct?
Correct.
And so he was going to try to get some sleep. And then he took the 2 Ambien and went to sleep, correct?
That is correct.
And that was at 5 o'clock in the morning?
Approximately 5.
So let me ask you some questions about that, Dr. Buffington. I think you had said early on, did you not, that, obviously the purpose of Ambien, it's a sleep aid. So it's something that you would take generally at night before you're going to go to bed, correct?
That is the instruction.
And it's also part of the instructions that, you want to be sure you give yourself, 8 hours of sleep time if you're going to take that medication. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the defendant told you that he took the Ambien around 5 a.m., even though he knew that he had court at 9 a.m., which was approximately 4 hours later, correct?
That's correct.
And then he said that he went to sleep, and then the next morning his father had to aggressively wake him up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did he kind of explain to you, either in words or by actions, exactly how his father aggressively woke him up?
Had to touch him or shake him.
Okay. He was laying down in the bed, asleep when his father did that?
I don't know whether it was a bed or a chair. I didn't ask that.
Okay. He didn't tell you that he was, you didn't have any information either from the defendant or from reading in the other materials that you reviewed, that he was sitting up in a chair, sleep texting while his father was shaking him awake, did you?
No, sir. That would be consistent with my concerns.
Okay. So you didn't have any information about that. So his father wakes him up, and then he gets up and he gets ready for court, correct?
That's correct.
He has the children there. They have to get to school, so Dad takes them to school, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then he goes to court. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And then you said that the defendant really didn't have much memory of what occurred in court. Is that right?
Still a snapshot. He remembers being there, but not fluid memory of the entire event.
Okay. Other than being there, was there anything that he told you that he could remember about being in court?
I don't recall the detail.
Okay. Have you got a chance to watch the video and listen to the audio of him being in court?
No.
You've not listened, you not watched it or listened to it at all?
I don't recall the court video. I've had other audio recordings.
Okay, well then let me kind of drill down with the question specifically. Because I know that originally the audio and video were kind of separate. So the audio, have you listened to the audio of him in court?
Yes.
Okay. So in that audio, is it not the case that the defendant appeared in court and he was wearing a dress shirt and a tie and slacks and his work ID badge? Is that correct?
Yes, which would not be out of the norm.
Sure. Okay. And while he comes into court, they advise the judge what they're there for. The defendant identifies himself by name. Is that correct?
Yes, there was interaction.
Okay. And the defendant also told the judge where he worked. Correct?
Yes.
And then the judge went through a colloquy with him. Correct?
Correct.
And a part of that was one of the questions that was asked of him was, are you under the influence of any intoxicants? Correct?
Yes.
And the defendant immediately said no. Isn't that correct?
Right.
So the judge
equally concerned.
Okay. So the judge finishes the colloquy, and the judge imposes the agreed upon sentence in this particular case, which involved probation. Correct? And a part of the conditions of that probation was that he was supposed to complete a batterer's intervention program. Correct?
I think so.
To which the defendant in that court proceeding told the judge he had already signed up for, correct?
I don't remember the full dialogue.
Okay, the audio video will speak for itself, correct?
I would assume so.
Okay, so is it also true that in the course of that same conversation between the defendant and the judge, the defendant, when the judge was talking to him about what the court costs were, the defendant specifically asked the judge if he could apply his cash bond to pay for the court costs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was something that was completely initiated by the defendant to the court. Is that right?
Yes.
And so is it your testimony here today that during that period of time where he's having this conversation with the judge, saying I'm not under the influence of any intoxicants, and the judge is making a finding that it's freely and voluntary, his plea is freely and voluntarily made, he's engaging in this conversation about his batterer's intervention program, he's initiating those conversations about having his cash bond applied to pay his court costs. It's your testimony here today that he was essentially sleep pleading?
Well, it could be. There's far more intricate things that people have done under the same parasomnia effects. But I'm looking at not just that one event, but that is explainable. But I'm looking at the totality of also the other behaviors of day and memory impairment.
Okay. So the defendant tells you he leaves court. Is that correct?
Correct. Well, he spoke with his father in the parking lot. He remembers that like an image.
Okay. And isn't it true that the defendant's father, and this whole thing, why he was in court, that was about an injunction, correct? That the defendant had against him by Amanda Colley, correct?
Again, Judge, we object to the line of question.
You can answer.
I don't recall the exact circumstances.
Okay. Isn't it true that during this conversation in the parking lot or with his dad somewhere, that his dad had told him he needed to stay away from Amanda?
Correct. Which would be offensive.
Okay, and that's what the defendant told you?
Pardon me?
Is that what the defendant told you?
No, you just asked me
I mean, that his dad told him that.
I don't recall
You don't recall where that came from?
that. No.
Do you recall it being a part of what you reviewed?
No, I said it would be advisable.
No. Okay, let me rephrase my question. Isn't it true that the materials that you, either from your interview with the defendant or from the materials that you reviewed, that his dad told him he needed to stay away from Amanda?
I don't recall that. I do remember another discussion where that was, I think, from the house, talking to his dad on the phone.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Now, you provided a sort of a case summary and opinions in this case, correct?
Correct.
And I know y'all didn't go through that today during the direct examination, but here are your case chronology on 8/27/15 at 9 o'clock. Can you read that right there and let me know if that refreshes your recollection?
James Colley Sr. stated that he told J.C. after court to stay away from Amanda. I don't know whether that was in the parking lot or after court.
Okay, all right. But it's around the 9 o'clock time frame? Okay, all right, fair enough. So he leaves court. So he leaves court and he goes home, is that correct?
Yes.
And he remembers getting home, is that right?
He remembers being there.
Okay. And he remembered also having a conversation with Amanda, is that right?
That's correct.
Over the phone, correct?
Over the cell phone.
All right. And I think you had described that the conversation, at least as the defendant told you, was he was trying to apologize and explain for busting the TVs the night before, is that correct?
Correct.
And that was something that the defendant told you he had done. I mean, I think we talked about finding the sexual items in the home, but he also told you that while he was in the home, he got angry and busted all these TVs in the house, correct?
He did. He had recollection from the evening prior,
Okay.
just not the morning.
Okay. So, and would you describe that as vile behavior, busting these TVs after getting angry?
Something under-educated. Yes.
So he has this conversation with Amanda over the phone, and he decides that he's apologizing, and then he goes to her house. Is that right?
Yes, he said he was going to bring some money by to help let her know that he would replace them.
Okay. Did he say he was going to bring money, or was he going to bring a check?
I don't know.
Okay. So he's going to pay for the TVs. Is that right?
Correct.
And so he drives to her house. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did at any point in time did he tell you that she told him, or he had information that the police were either had been to the house or were on their way to the house or anything like that?
The only thing I remember from that phrase is that before he left, so it's still while he was at home, calling her,
Okay.
is that I think he said something to the effect of, "You don't need to call the police, I'll come pay." And she said, "Well, that may be too late."
Okay. And what else did he tell you about that conversation?
I think that she said it wasn't her who called. That's it.
Okay. So the defendant told you that she wasn't the one that called the police, that it was someone else. Did the defendant tell you who it was?
I don't know that she told him that it was.
So, okay, so he gets off the phone with her after receiving this information. He decides to go to her house to give her the money, give her the check, or whatever it was, correct?
Yes.
And he told you that he went and parked where?
In the street behind them, so behind their back.
Did he tell you why he didn't just drive up to the front of the house?
So that if he was going, if the police were there, he could just go on and stop.
Okay, so he was in the process of this. She had told him that the police had been called. It was already too late not to call the police. She wasn't the one that called. He decides to go over there anyway, correct?
That's what he recalled.
And of course, he had an injunction against. He wasn't supposed to be there to begin with, correct?
True.
And he knows the police have been called, so he goes over there anyway. And so he's making the decision to not go to the front of the house like you would normally do. He made the decision to go to the neighborhood behind the house. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's what the defendant told you.
That's correct.
And he's making those decisions during this period of time, correct?
That's correct.
So he goes to this behind the house, and he tells you that what was the next thing he told you he remembered after he got there?
He remembered standing in the backyard looking at the back of the house.
Okay. And that's when he saw a man that was inside the house, correct?
People that included what he thought was important.
Okay. So, as I understand your testimony, he then remembers turning from the backyard and going back to the car. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you said something about some guns.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
What did the defendant tell you about the guns?
The next thing he remembered was standing in the backyard with one and firing at the sliding glass doors.
Okay. He told you that he got the guns from the trunk?
That is where they came from. He doesn't recall getting them.
Okay. And I believe I heard your testimony is that from your understanding of the materials you reviewed or wherever the source of information was, is that the family had put the guns in the truck to hide them from the defendant. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So, and this was not the defendant's car. This was his sister's car, correct?
Correct. Because the grandfather to the kids had to use Mr. Colley's car to take them to school because of car seats.
Okay. So he goes back to his sister's car. It's not his car. He goes back to his sister's car and gets the guns from the trunk, although he says he doesn't remember doing that. He gets them from the trunk where the family has hid them from him. Is that correct?
That's what he stated.
Okay. And so the next recollection he has is when he's standing in the backyard and then begins shooting into the house. Is that right?
That's correct. Into the back door.
And then he goes into the house, correct?
Remembers being in the house and firing.
But he doesn't remember seeing anyone, doesn't remember shooting anyone. That part he doesn't remember, correct?
What I recall him stating is he doesn't remember shooting at anyone. No, I don't recall if he saw a body to the side, peripheral vision, but not finding someone and shooting.
Okay. Did he tell you, whenever he was in the backyard and he saw the people in there, one of the people he thought was a man, did he tell you how he felt about that?
No.
Did you ask him that?
Yes.
What did he say?
He doesn't recall.
So he remembers shooting the gun inside the house. Is that correct?
Correct. Firing.
And then he leaves the house. Is that right?
Correct.
And then he returns home.
Yes.
And he remembers talking to his father. Is that right?
His uncle.
His uncle. You didn't testify earlier that he was talking to his father about going to his relatives in West Virginia. He gave him money.
That's later. I said in the driveway of the house, he talked to his father, his uncle, and I think it's William.
Okay, my mistake. So, but he eventually gets home and does have a conversation with his father.
He doesn't recall being there.
Okay. And his father gave him money and basically told him about relatives in West Virginia, correct? And then he remembers being on the interstate, essentially heading in that direction, correct?
Correct.
Now, you had an opportunity to one of the things that you reviewed a lot of transcripts, correct?
Yes.
And in order to consider those as a part of your opinion here today, correct?
Correct. To look for things that may be relevant to.
One of those was the transcript of the defendant's father's, an interview that he gave to the police, correct?
Yes, I don't recall it verbatim. Yes.
Okay. Isn't it true, Dr. Buffington, that the defendant's dad told the police right after all this happened, that the defendant told him during one of the conversations that he had with the defendant, "Dad, she keeps putting me in jail. I can't take it anymore. I've done what I had to do."
Judge, I object on hearsay grounds and relevance.
You sustain the objection.
Yes.
Sustain the objection.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the medications, the substances in this particular case.
Yes, sir.
Is it your testimony today, Dr. Buffington, that the defendant was recently prescribed the Ambien close in time to August the 22nd, 2015?
Correct. That would have been on 8/10 of 2015, at an appointment with Dr. Sanchez.
Okay. Isn't it true that the defendant had also been prescribed Ambien back in 2014?
I don't recall seeing that on the profile.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? You received pharmacy records in this particular case, correct?
That's correct.
And you reviewed those in preparation to develop your opinion here today, correct?
I did.
Showing you what's titled a patient prescription record from Holiday CVS.
Correct.
You have that, sir?
Yes.
I'll show it to you here. And these are the defendant's, these are his records concerning some medications that he was prescribed at various times by this pharmacy. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm looking for the dates on each prescription. Date field.
Okay. And here, the Zolpidem, that's the Ambien, correct? Here at the very bottom?
Mm-hmm.
And that was prescribed to him on December the 18th of 2014, correct?
Correct. So about 8 months prior.
So the August the 10th date was not the first time he'd been prescribed Ambien.
Correct.
Did you see anything in any of the medical records or any of the records whatsoever that you reviewed that indicated from December the 18th of 2014 to August the 27th of 2015 that the defendant had any issues whatsoever with Ambien?
No, sir. Nor would you expect it. That's not the way we don't take it. If you have a problem, it's not like you have a very Sunday every day.
But you indicated, I think, earlier that usually you talked about the equilibrium that the drugs have in your system, that usually takes a period of time for everything to equilibrate. And usually you will see, doctors have, try to counsel patients to kind of stick with the medications because generally speaking, the side effects occur early on when you begin taking the medications, correct?
No, sir. It would not be a full assumption that they're early on. They could, but they could also happen after a period of time.
Okay. But from December of 2014 to August, there's no evidence that he had any issues, any parasomnic events or anything like that with regard to the Ambien.
So based on that record, it appeared only to be a 1 month fill. So it had only been December and early January.
But still, no evidence of any issues, correct?
As I stated.
I want to ask you this, Doctor. Isn't it true that the only evidence in this particular case that the defendant actually took the Ambien or the Wellbutrin or the Cymbalta or any of the other substances you mentioned, the only evidence that he actually took those substances came from the defendant himself?
Yes, just like if I was seeing a patient in an exam room or an ER, the only record you will have is from that person, logically.
But here you weren't meeting him in an exam room or an ER, correct?
No, but it was for a clinical interview.
Okay, but my question though is you weren't meeting him in an ER or an exam room, correct?
No.
You were actually meeting him in jail, is that correct?
Yes.
Where he had criminal charges against him, correct?
Yes.
Of the most serious kind, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's the environment that he's relaying this information to you, correct?
sleep.
Okay, thank you for that. So in terms of him actually taking the medication as prescribed, the only evidence of that came from the defendant himself, correct?
Correct.
And the only evidence that you have that it had the effects that you've described today came from the defendant himself.
Correct. It would be the only person who could have tested.
And if the defendant lied to you about all those things, that would adversely affect your opinion here today, wouldn't it?
It could, yes.
Nothing further.
Any regret?
Yes. Doctor, let me follow up with the last couple of questions that were posed to you from Mr. Johnson. You previously provided testimony to the jury about, in your practice as a clinician, you meet with the patients, is that correct?
Absolutely.
And when you're meeting with the patients face-to-face, part of that process for your evaluation and your ability to render assistance, medical or pharmacological assistance to the patient, is you have to get a history from the patient, is that correct?
Correct. And we gauge patients on their level of historical detail and consistency.
And you also have to review, look at their medical records, their pharmacy records, what they've been prescribed when they're meeting with you, correct?
To cross-reference or validate what statements they make. So if there were statements that were made that didn't support the medication dispensing or access, then there would be an issue to follow up on.
Right.
Question being,
Is that process necessary in order for you to give advice to the patient about whether to continue on the medications, change medication, and I include advice also to the treating physicians? Is it necessary to review the records, interview the patient in order to give them assessment and expert assistance?
I would say imperative, yes.
Okay. And that's normal in your practice?
Absolutely.
Now, you did that with Mr. Colley, although you didn't see him in the ER or in your office. You saw him at the jail, but did you still find it necessary to evaluate Mr. Colley, go over his medical records, his pharmacy records, in order for you to be able to render an opinion regarding the medications and impairment issues in this case?
Yes, I still had questions that were unresolved, that if I only looked at a printed record years later, and I wasn't one of the treating practitioners, still needed to be asked and addressed to look at, did the items match? Was it consistent with what those drugs can produce? Did he have access to those medications? What was he taking at the time? What were his side effects or successes that were happening based on that collective regimen? And then look at the actions and put it into a total review.
Okay. And in this case, you did have records confirming that Mr. Colley had been prescribed Ambien in August of 2015.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any redraw?
No, Your Honor.
Buffington excused.
Yes.
You are excused. What are you going after?
Crystal Colley, right?
That's right, if you'll take the witness stand here. You were placed under oath last week, so you remain under oath.
Yes.
You would remain marked.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know you've testified earlier in this case. If you could reintroduce yourself to the jury, give us your name.
Crystal Colley Wright.
And again, for the record, you are J.R.'s sister. Okay. I don't know if this came out earlier in your testimony. Obviously, you have a sister, Rhonda, and J.R. is your brother. Where is J.R. in the pecking order of the siblings?
He's our baby brother,
Okay. And who is the oldest?
Rhonda.
Okay.
Yes, I'm the middle child.
All right. Need to do it for the record. I don't make a habit of asking someone's age. So let's start with Rhonda. How old is Rhonda?
Rhonda's 47.
All right, how old are you?
42.
All right.
And James is 38.
And, okay, so a little bit of family background. Where was James born?
Elgin, Illinois.
Okay, and obviously, you and Rhonda were in the picture at that time. Were you also born in Elgin?
I was.
Okay, how about Rhonda?
Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. And, all right, so going forward then, did there come a time when your family, you and your parents, Judy and JT, or James Colley Sr., did the family move from Elgin at some point?
We did. We moved to Orange Park, Florida in 1986, the summer of 1986.
What was your father doing for a living at that time?
Well, when we lived in Elgin, Illinois, it was a suburb of Chicago, my father owned his heating and air conditioning business, and we used to vacation here quite frequently. My mother has family that lives here, and my father always said, one day I'm going to pack up and move to Florida. And we were literally here on vacation in June, and Dad said, I'm done. I can make more money in Florida with what I do, and sold to his partner, and then moved to Orange Park, Florida, and began doing heating and air conditioning here.
I see. All right. How old would JR have been when you came?
He was right about between 5 and 6. He would have just turned 6 the year we moved here.
Okay. So your dad is doing the heating and air conditioning business at that time for his own self? He had his own business?
When we lived in Illinois, when we moved to Florida, he actually was employed by a company that did heating and air conditioning for, there was an old bank we had back then called Barnett Bank.
I see. Yeah, there it was. Okay. So when you came to Orange Park, was your mom working at the time?
Yes.
What did she do?
My mother, for many years, worked for our local florist in Orange Park, Florida.
Okay. All right. So you and JR and Rhonda go to school in Orange Park?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember what grade JR would have been in Orange Park?
Well, I was in, he would have been right about first grade. He was first grade. Yeah, he had kindergarten in Illinois and then first grade in Florida.
Okay. Do you remember what school he went to?
Grove Park Elementary, we both did.
Okay. And so did the family stay in Orange Park for some period of time?
Until 1994, the year I graduated from high school. My father had gotten a promotion, actually in 93, and he moved to Ormond Beach area. And my mother stayed while my brother and I finished that school year, and my father resided with aunts and uncles while they were building a home.
So your mom and you guys stayed in Orange Park, Dad goes to Ormond Beach?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and then did there come a time when the family moved to Ormond Beach?
1994.
Okay.
June of 1994, they actually moved into their home.
I see. So does JR start going to school in Volusia County?
Yes.
All right. And about how old is he at that time?
He would have been around 12. I think he began 7th grade in Ormond.
Okay.
6th or 7th grade.
Did he eventually go to high school in Ormond?
He did.
Or in Volusia?
Yes.
Do you remember what high school?
Seabreeze?
Okay. And so by that time, by the time he's going to high school, you would have graduated from high school by then?
Yes, I graduated in 1994.
Okay. All right. And then obviously Rhonda sometime prior to that.
Rhonda was 88.
I see. What high school did you graduate from?
Orange Park.
Okay. Did Rhonda also graduate from Orange Park?
Yes.
Okay. So when JR is going to high school and then graduates from high school, let's talk a little bit about some employment history there. For example, did he work during high school?
I believe he was in the OJT program. I guess it's where he goes to school part of the day and then works part of the day and gets credit towards graduation for that. And when he was in high school, gosh, he had worked at Sbarro's Pizza, he worked at Home Depot, he had contract cleaning Barnett Banks. I know friends of his own landscaping businesses, he did that on weekends. He worked at a seafood restaurant, Barnacle Bill's. And that was just in Daytona until he graduated. Once he graduated, then, but yeah, Yeah, he worked since he was 15 years old.
How did you do grade-wise in high school?
He was on honor roll.
Okay. And how about earlier, like grade school, elementary school, that
He
time?
always did well in school. He was held back one year, but it was because we found out he actually needed glasses. And then my parents took him out of grade school, that he was in the Grove Park, because they were not very happy that the fact my child's gone all year, and all of a sudden now it's the end of the year. Anyway, so then he went to a private Christian school for a year.
For you. What grade would that have been, do you know?
He was second.
Second grade, okay.
That was his first year moving to Florida. He was held back at first.
Okay. So then after high school, your brother, does he stay in Volusia County? What happens to him then?
He stays in Volusia County for probably a year. I don't even know if it was that long. And then there wasn't really much employment as far as corporate-wise. It was touristy kind of stuff down there. So he did move in with my sister Rhonda in Jacksonville.
Okay. And at that time, was she married to Dan?
Yes,
Okay. And do they have children?
they do not.
Okay. So JR moves to Jacksonville, lives with Dan and Rhonda. Where are you at that point in time?
I was married.
Okay. And were you living in Jacksonville or?
Well, at that time, I had actually lived in Clearwater, but I had moved back, and I was actually living in the home as well. But Rhonda was on a work.
It's complicated.
Rhonda was closing down a site for her business, so she was actually in the state of Texas. And so I just had my daughter, and I did not like anyway, so I moved back in while my husband was trying to transfer back to Jacksonville as well. So it was me, my daughter, my brother James, and Dan living in Orange Park.
Okay. So by the time when JR moves in with Rhonda and Dan, does he work during that period of time?
Yes, he worked for AT&T. I think it was Transtech or Convergys. It was either AT&T, American Transtech, or it was already converted to Convergys. But it was a telecommunications company. They did customer service for all kinds of products. Whenever there's on a product, there's an 800 number in the back. You call that number, and that's what that company did. It was service for multiple companies, multiple businesses.
Okay. And did he do that for a while?
He did that for a while he was going through a technical education program. He was going to go into computer programming.
Okay. And what then happened as far as employment?
He he got his certificate for computer programming and began looking for work, especially with AT&T and Convergys, because they did have multiple opportunities, but there was nothing that was, and he just fell into this mortgage opportunity and realized, hey, I can make more money doing mortgages than I can this thing I just got a degree for.
So where do you work? Who do you work for?
Merrill Lynch was, I believe, we're all in the mortgage industry and things change, but I'm pretty sure the first one may have been Merrill Lynch.
Still in Jacksonville?
In Jacksonville and Southside, yes.
Okay. And then following Merrill Lynch, does he work for other folks?
Yes, for Merrill Lynch, then PHH for many years, and then Chase Manhattan for many, many years, and then Citibank was the most recent.
Okay. And he was working for Citibank at the time of this
Yes.
incident?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know roughly about how long he had been working for Citibank?
2 years?
Okay. So would it be fair to say all total, how long would you say he'd been working in the mortgage finance industry?
Oh my gosh, he would have started at least 15, 16 years.
Okay. All right. So it's been pretty steady employment in that particular field.
Yes, he was always employed. The only time he was unemployed was between Chase and Citi, and he was under severance at that time.
I see. Was it full-time employment with all these folks?
Since he was an adult, yes, since he graduated from high school.
Okay. Do you have any idea if he was making good money, anything like that?
Yes, my brother made a very substantial income for many, many, many years.
Okay.
He owned his own home.
And that was from his work in the mortgage industry?
Yes.
I see. Okay, so, and during that, let me kind of go back a little bit in time frame, going back to like his high school years in Volusia County. are you staying in touch with him? Are you still, how would you describe your relationship with your brother at that time?
Well, even when we lived in separate cities, there was never at least one day of a week that I didn't see my family. So I spoke to him constantly, and actually when I was first married, when he was living with Rhonda and Dan, there was a time he worked at AT&T. He came to my house. I had an apartment briefly. He came and had dinner with me every single night. He said he was going to grow feathers because I made chicken every day. But no, I'm very, very frequent. At least phone calls every day and saw at least once a week.
Okay.
Was he also close to his sister?
Rhonda?
Yes.
Yes, the three of us, yes.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say the three of you have a very close relationship?
Yes,
And that's been consistent over the years?
yes.
Okay. Every family is different, is the reason why I asked that. During his time with his employment, any of his employers in the mortgage finance arena, were you aware of any charitable work he did for anybody?
Well, I don't recall exactly what companies, but I know he's done Habitat for Humanity. I know he did some kind of boating thing. Those are the only two I know definitely. I know there was lots of, like Chase, we did it a lot, but it was Habitat, it was constant volunteer stuff. There was mentoring, that kind of stuff, but I don't know the dates or anything, but I do know he was active in Habitat for Humanity and a dragon boat racing thing for charity.
And for the record, Habitat for Humanity is building houses for the poor?
It's building houses or rehabilitating, like boys and girls homes, anything to help improve the community.
Failed to mention too, did you ever work in the same business or for the same company as your brother?
Multiple times.
Okay. Would that also be in the mortgage
Oh,
area?
I forgot, he also worked for Bank of America. I apologize. He did work for Bank of America as well.
Okay. Was that also in the mortgage finance area?
No, that was doing customer service. That was the AT&T and all that. It was that period. It was when he first located to Jacksonville. He did a customer service position with Bank of America.
So which companies did you work with your brother in?
Bank of America,
Uh-huh.
that's smart. Chase, PHH, that's it.
Okay. Were you in the same department with him during this period of time?
At PHH, yes.
Okay. Was that the customer service?
No, that was loan processing.
Okay. You did the same stuff too that he was
Yes.
doing?
Well,
Did
he
you-
was a little, I was kind of like the entry part, but yeah, it was the same department. We did the same thing.
Okay.
Just different levels of it.
You mentioned the word mentoring. Did he mentor other employees at places that he worked at?
I know personally at Chase because I've been there for many years now, and my coworkers are very familiar with my brother, and they all speak of how he was always, when someone would come into that department, he was their trainer. So he would help fellow employees and help them, get to work because he was a top performer. So people would always just go to him and ask, hey, well, how can I make the bonuses you're making? So he always would reach out.
Oh, so he gets bonuses for his work?
They used to, but they changed. But yes, Chase used to pay the underwriters based on how much they were getting out, but you still had to meet a service score. And as long as you had that service score, but then you were still cranking out loans, you could make a very good living.
Okay. So who do you work for now?
Chase,
Chase. And how long have you been with them?
8 years.
So that's in the same area, mortgage?
It's mortgage, but I do mortgage fraud.
Okay. All right. Would you characterize your brother as a good employee?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And to your knowledge, did he get favorable reviews, peer reviews, that sort of thing at his employment?
I know on multiple occasions he would always receive a high rating where he was capping out. And so he had actually been asked to take a management role because based on the level of pay he was receiving and all that they could only increase his pay at minimal amounts at that point. But he was always a top performer.
Okay. Let me jump to another topic. JR has kids, 2 children, Trey and Avery. Have you, how would you describe JR with regard to his upbringing and care for his children?
He was an amazing father.
Take your time.
He was a wonderful father.
And can you tell the folks on the jury what you observed to make that testimony? Judge, may I hand her a tissue with it? This food is only going to
Thank you. He spent every day with his children. From the moment he woke up till the moment he went to bed, he spent with his children. He taught them to swim. He taught them to tie their shoes. He taught them to ride their bikes. He took them to school, to and from school every day. He took them to and from after-school activities every day. In the rain, I would get calls to come watch Avery to make sure she could watch her little brother. He did everything for his children. He was a wonderful father.
Would that be through their upbringing?
I'm sorry,
Would that be consistent through their upbringing?
their entire lives.
Okay. Did the children seem to enjoy being around Jared?
Very much.
Okay. Did your brother ever coach, do any coaching activities?
Yes, he coached trade for 2 years for T-ball, and then he coached flag football, and then recently he was coaching Trey's first actual football team.
Okay. How long had he been doing the coaching?
2 years.
Okay. All right. And I'm assuming there's a certain season or part of the year where that happened?
The baseball was spring, and the football was fall
Okay.
for both years.
I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, those are volunteer coaching positions? Didn't get paid for it, anything like that? Where was the, in relation to the house on Bellagio, where did the football and baseball activities occur?
The neighborhood association, so it would have been less than a half a mile from their home. It was literally catty corner.
And how did your brother did he seem to enjoy doing the coaching?
Very much.
Okay. Did your brother, JR, interact with other kids in the neighborhood?
Oh, yes. They're a very close neighborhood, always outside. It's a fairly new development, so most of the children were the same age as Trey and Avery. So every time I would go over there, all the neighborhood kids were out together with my brother and Mike Dickens. They were the two fathers that would be out there, or Amanda would be out there with Gail. But they were very interactive out there. Then they were all right about the same age, between anywhere from newborn. I think the oldest was maybe 6 or 7. But yeah, he
Okay.
definitely played with all the neighborhood kids, and they were out there every day.
That included the Dickens children?
Yes, Sean and Addison.
Okay. Sean has Down
Down
syndrome?
syndrome.
Okay. Okay. So, and have you seen that activity with playing and interacting with the other kids in the neighborhood during the entirety of the time that JR lived in Maribel?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, may I say something? Even prior to him having his own children, he lived in the home in Orange Park, and unfortunately, there was a young girl that was kidnapped and found to be murdered. Jared would leave work and he did not have children, but he would leave work every day and would ask for as many of us to come volunteer to help in the search for this little girl. And all the kids in the neighborhood, he would go outside. They were a little bit older. He would go outside, come over, and he'd be out there playing football with older boys. And so, no, he's always been wonderful with neighbors and children, especially my own daughter.
So how old was JR when he with the incident you just described?
That would have been, probably 10 years ago, right about 10 years.
Okay,
No, because he was married, so it would have been about 9, 10 years ago.
okay. All right, and so you have a daughter yourself?
I do, she's 16.
16. And so you interacted with her, played with her?
Since the day she was born, in fact, he drove 4 hours, he was on a date. I delivered my daughter in Clearwater, and he was living in Jacksonville, and he drove 4 hours when I was in labor to make sure he would be there to have her birth, and he spent almost every day with her.
So he's helped with her upbringing as well, too?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how is he around animals?
Wonderful. He spent $1,000 on a dog that was supposed to be a duck retrieving dog, which ended up being his best friend. And he would go get the ducks, but he never would quite bring them back. And instead of being a hunting dog, the dog slept in bed every day and lived a very happy life until we recently lost him. We used to make it a joke because he got so overweight. We would say he had a thyroid problem, but actually his cause of death was actually a thyroid problem. He was a big boy. But JR's had pets his whole life. Growing up, my mother and father, we always had indoor pets. Everything from, he had a gerbil, we've had dogs, cats, fish, turtles. We've always had pets, and they've always been indoor pets, not pets that we use for labor or to keep outside in this Ford heat.
Would you say, with regard to the kids in the neighborhood, would you say he was a positive influence for the kids in the neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to talk about another issue. You've certainly grown up with your brother. Let's talk about alcohol. What can you tell the jury about issues, if any, that your brother has with regard to alcohol?
My brother had a tendency for many years to what I call binge drink. He didn't drink every day, but when he drank, he drank. And he didn't make very good decisions because he would not quit drinking. Once he started drinking, it would go hours and hours.
And this has been going on for a while?
For many years, yeah.
Okay. Did he ever get treatment for that?
No, he was always in denial of it.
Okay. Did you ever tell him, hey, I think you've got a problem, you need to get some help?
Yes, when he would do like an all-night thing, I was worried about him dying.
Okay. And he would not go or did not seek treatment even when you told him that?
It was always, I'm sorry, I got caught up, I was playing poker and I wasn't aware. There was always an excuse, there was always something. It was, no, I don't have a problem, I don't drink every day. He did not recognize that there was a problem.
Are there alcoholic issues in the family?
Not with anyone else besides, I'm not gonna lie, I do enjoy an adult beverage, but no one else in the family. Well, my grandparents, but they were deceased.
Right.
Well, when the alcoholism went away, James was too little.
Okay. So, and have you known your brother to use, on occasion, cocaine?
Yes.
And for how long a period of time?
I don't know when it began, but I do know that it's been for a few years.
Okay. By the way, on the alcohol issues, your brother, alcohol of choice, more in the category of beer or wine or liquor, or do you...
Well, it kind of changed over the years. When he was younger, it was a lot of Crown Royal with some beers here and there, and then he had some health problems, and so he became a red wine drinker, and then I guess would kind of mix some Crown Royal in with that as well.
Did you ever advise your brother about getting treatment for cocaine?
No, because he always denied it.
Okay. Okay. Looking back, do you think your brother could have benefited from some treatment for the alcoholism?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware of any issues that your brother had for depression back in 2015?
Yes.
Were you aware of any medications that he was taking for depression?
I was not until later.
Okay. All right. Okay. Do you know from your own knowledge, I know a lot's happened since 2015, but were you aware that he was going to a doctor or had prescriptions for depression?
I knew he was going to a doctor, and I knew he had, we've seen him help from his primary doctor as well as counseling.
Do you know in August of 2015 if your brother was taking pain medications, that sort of thing?
Oh, yes, I do know he was on that medication.
Do you know what for? Why was he taking pain
He had
medications?
shoulder surgery.
Okay. Had he,
Oh, and ankle surgery. It was a previous ankle injury, and the titanium screws started coming out, so they would go back in. So he had ankle surgery and shoulder surgery.
I see. And was that surgery like sometime before August?
It was very recent. It was within months of August.
Okay.
Had your brother had back problems for a while?
Yes, it's inherited. We all have it. He was the last one to finally have back surgery.
Okay. Was he experiencing back pain for some period of time?
For years.
Judge, am I okay on time? I wanted to get into some pictures, but all right, good. May I press the witness? Have you had the opportunity with me recently to look at some family photographs? Is that yes for the record?
Yes.
Okay. And do you recall, what those pictures depicted, what were in the pictures?
Family photos.
Okay. And are you able to, recognize what's in those pictures and whether they accurately reflect what you can describe?
Yeah.
Judge, at this time, I'm going to move that Defense B be admitted into state or to Defense Exhibit 1.
Any objection?
No, no.
That objection will be received as
Give me 1 second to make sure this works, Judge. I'm going to say some things for the record so it's identified on the record, but are you able to see the pictures?
Yes.
Okay. What for the record is image 0523? Do you recognize that picture?
I do. That is my brother and my niece and nephew.
Do you recall about how long ago or when that was?
It was days before the incident.
The day before the incident? Um, 0525? What is that?
That is my nephew Trey opening his birthday presents
And when would this have been?
the day before.
The incident in this case? Where would this have been at, by the way?
That's my sister Rhonda's back patio.
Okay. This picture, which would be 0526, is that the same birthday party?
That was the Sunday before at Chuck E. Cheese, and that's Trey, Avery, my mother.
Okay. And was JR there for that?
Yes.
Okay. What's being celebrated there?
Trey's birthday.
Okay. He would have turned in what year? How old?
That was his 6th birthday.
Okay. And 0529?
That is Trey Avery.
Do you know about how long ago that was?
That would have been a school, that would have been right when they started school, right, that year.
And the 0530?
That's my brother, Trey Avery, and his twin younger children.
John Schwinghammer's children?
Yes.
Would that have been at the beach?
Yes.
0533?
That's Avery.
Okay. Do you know about when this would have been?
That was the summer as well. That was probably within 2 or 3 weeks before the incident.
And where was this at?
That's Rhonda's home.
Okay. And would JR have been there at the time?
Yes.
By the way, I think it's fair to say on the record, but let me just have you answer this. JR, we all refer to JR as James Colley Jr.
We call him JR, some people call him Jane.
0535, what is that?
That was 4th of July at Roll Call Village, the 4th of July before the incident.
Okay. 0537, it's a collage pictures.
Trey's birthday, the day before.
Okay. 0538, again, a collage of pictures. Is that the same? Well, let me tell you, tell it.
That is the collage of the Sunday before the incident for Trey's birthday at Chuck E. Cheese.
About well, we got a different number. Let's read off 320, the last three numbers on it. What is that?
That was before JR moved to Ormond. He played for the local football association. He was maybe 12 there.
Okay. And that would have been in
Orange Park.
Okay.
Sorry.
And last three numbers are 340. What's that?
That is JR's high school graduation picture. Senior picture, I'm sorry. Senior picture.
From Seabreeze High School?
From Seabreeze.
And last three numbers, 370. What is it?
That was Trey's T-ball, and that's Trey Avery and JR, and that would have been, I think that's the summer before the incident.
Okay. This
Or
would
earlier that year. I don't know, that's 15 or 14.
Would JR have been doing coaching?
For both years, yes.
Okay. Would this have been at the park you described earlier?
Yes,
In the neighborhood?
that's Valencia, yeah.
Okay. 380, last three numbers, is that the same activity?
Yes, that's probably a different game, but yeah.
Okay. And last three numbers, 382, when would that have been?
I think that's Trey's first day of school, first day of kindergarten, August of 2015.
Okay. He went to what kindergarten back then?
Mill Creek.
And Avery, she was
She was in the daycare, something weeks.
402, last three numbers, where's that?
That was earlier 2015 summer. That was taken at Lego Land.
Okay. 421?
That would have been probably 2014. That's JR in the fishing caught.
Did your brother like to fish?
Almost every day, even in the pond in the backyard.
Okay. In Marabella, you would fish in Marabella?
Yes.
You know if there's fish in Marabella?
Yes.
Okay. All right, 422, what is that?
This was literally August of 2015. He just started coaching this team. And that's my brother and Trey.
How about 441?
That's Trey's first day of school after JR dropped Trey off. That's him and Avery at daycare.
Okay. By the way, in general, does JR take a lot of pictures of himself with the kids? Is he a
Yes.
selfie kind of?
He's a little vain, yes. He likes selfie photos, but mostly you see he includes his children.
442, last three numbers, what is that?
I think there was another trip to Legoland, or I'm not sure where that one is, but I know that is the summer as well of 2015.
And of course, that's JR.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's JR Trey Avery.
450 was that?
That was one day after work in 2015. That's JR, my daughter, and Trey.
So that's Savannah there in the picture?
It is.
Fishing, it's like.
Yeah, they were fishing after school one day. That's the same day, and that's JR and Trey.
451, okay. 460.
That's Trey's first day of kindergarten.
461.
I think that's 2014 trip to Disney.
Trey Avery and
I'm
officials.
sorry, yes, Trey Avery and JR.
It's all right, we just have to make sure the court report's covered. What is 471?
This is Avery's second journey, and that's JR and Avery and a family friend and my mother, and that's in their home.
This is where?
Marabella.
Okay. How about 481? Who's that on his shoulders?
That's Avery at 6 months old, and I'm not sure where that photo was taken, but it's JR and Avery.
So logo on that hat, does that have any significance with the 4-leaf clover on the hat?
Notre Dame. My
Mhm.
brother is a huge Notre Dame fan.
Big Notre Dame. Has he always been a big Notre Dame?
His whole life. Well, growing up in Illinois, college football isn't very big, and the only notorious colleges that we have is Northwestern and Illini, and they really weren't worth anything. But Indiana was pretty close, though.
491?
It's JR and Trey at one of Trey's games that JR coached T-ball for.
500?
That's the same day, and that's Avery and JR at Trey's football game.
501?
That's Trey's pre-K graduation, and that's JR and Trey.
520?
That's JR, and that's my daughter, and that's in West Virginia.
And 521?
That's Trey, and that's JR, and that's leaving one of his first games.
How old would Trey been?
5.
Is that the same, by the way, that's the same ballpark
Yes,
that's in the neighborhood?
that's Valencia. He played football near Mill Creek. I may have mixed that up earlier. T-ball was in Valencia, and football was over near at the Mill Creek Elementary.
I see. So Trey that would be Trey playing T-ball then?
Yes,
Okay. All right, and 530?
that was summer of 2015, and that's Legoland, and that's JR Trey Avery.
540?
That would have been probably 89.
Who is that?
That's my sister Rhonda and JR.
Okay. And do you know where this was taken at?
That's in my parents' home in Orange Park.
And how about 560?
That is in Cincinnati. We had gone to a Reds game, and that's my brother James and my father, JT.
I see. The gentleman with the big C on his hat, that's your father?
Yes, that's my dad.
And I understand he's not doing it like your father, is that correct?
No, he's there.
570 was a...
This would have been the day before, I'm sorry, I believe it was 2 days before. This is JR and Avery getting treated for lice.
Do you know where this was at?
That was at the lice facility place.
050?
That was the summer of 2014. That was Trey and Avery's combined birthday party, and that's JR on the blow-up slide.
051?
That would have been 2013, maybe? 14? But that's at the Jacksonville Zoo, and that's Trey, JR, and Avery.
How about 060?
This was at a cousin's 80th birthday party at Bowl America. And that's our friend Tammy, that's Trey, that's my daughter in a striped shirt, and that's JR.
And Bowl America is where?
Jacksonville.
Did your brother like to bowl?
Yeah, he did like to bowl. My father was a huge bowler, so we kind of got stuck into doing it quite often.
How about 090?
That's the same day. That's Avery's birthday party.
Mhm.
And that's Avery and JR.
Oh, okay.
And that's in the Mirabella home.
All right. 091.
This would have been around in the late 80s, and that's my parents' old kitchen in Orange Park, and that's my mother, and that's JR.
Okay. For the record, your mother is Judy Colley?
Correct.
And 100.
This is Easter Sunday, and this is when Rhonda and Dan actually owned the home in Orange Park at this time. And that's Savannah in the front, and that's my mother in the pink, myself, JR, Rhonda, and my dad.
And this would have been about how long ago?
That was probably 8 years ago? No, 9 years ago. It would have been about 9 years ago.
Let me ask you on another topic with regard to your mother. When you were younger, when you were a child, when JR was a child, did you ever, is there ever a time when your mom acted violently towards your dad in the presence of JR?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
There was a time my father had been having a marital affair, and my mother was called and informed that he had been having an affair, and he was not home, and JR and I were home, and she told me to take JR and go in his bedroom, and then I saw her sitting on the stairs with a baseball bat, and then I heard my dad's truck pull up, and I came out. And as my dad was walking in, I turned to JR, told him to go back in the room, as my mom began hitting my father with a baseball bat.
And JR was out in the living room when your mom still had the
There
baseball?
was a hallway, and he was behind me. It was me, my mother directly in front of us, and my father.
Okay. And did you see your mom hit your dad?
I did.
Okay. More than one time?
There were several times to where JR or myself.
More than one time, more than one, that one incident, did your mom hit your dad more than one time?
Yes.
How would JR have been at that time?
I was 14, so he would have been around 9.
Okay. And this was where?
In Orange Park home.
Orange Park. Was there ever any other time when JR would have witnessed any violent acts by your mom on your dad?
Well, during that same time period, during that same week, my mother had left, and we stayed home, and we stayed in the home with my father. It would have to be Thanksgiving, and my mom came to the house to see us for Thanksgiving, and her and my father got into another confrontation. My dad wasn't going to let her come into the home, and my mother grabbed a knife and told my dad that she was coming in the home.
And JR was at the house at the time?
Yes.
And do you know if he would have witnessed what had happened?
Yes, we were all, yes.
Okay. So this is within a week of the baseball bat incident?
4 or 5 days, yes.
Okay. And what did your mom do with the knife?
I really don't remember the details of it.
Okay.
I just know that police were called to the home, and Mom was removed voluntarily. There was no incident report filed or anything like that. I assume. I've actually forgotten about this incident altogether until recently, but no, Mom was removed from the home, and I believe she filed for divorce, and then they were able to reconcile, and then she came back home.
Okay. And again, the second incident is also in Orange Park as well.
Yes.
Either time, the baseball incident, the knife incident, was she ever arrested during
No.
that period of time?
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure. I forgot to ask you on a positive bit of information. Was your brother active in race car driving?
Yes, him and my father. That was something they did for several years together and spent lots of money and time doing.
From how old was JR when he first started involved?
Oh, he got into racing in high school. Him and Dad started buying muscle cars and like kind of working on that, and then it just progressed to where it got into like a actual racing bracket thing where they would have cars that were not street legal but made for racing, and that was all the way up for years. Actually, I apologize, it was not all the way up. James had stopped racing probably a year before the incident.
Okay. So back maybe in 2014, he stopped
Yes.
doing the race car stuff. But he had his own car, his own race car?
Yes, yes.
And he would keep it up, do the work on it, that sort of thing?
Yes, he was on the TV show Pigs. He would fun Ford weekends. They traveled all over, not just Florida, other states in racing brackets. He's won multiple sponsorships and car shows, all the muscle car shows at like World Golf Village, things like that. Him and my father participated in for years.
Would you describe JR's relationship with his father as close?
They were best friends.
Okay. And did your father enjoy being involved in the race car?
My father was involved in everything that had to do with us kids. My father went to every T-ball game on Saturdays, even though it was a 2-hour drive. My father was involved when the kids were sick, so that Jared didn't miss work because he was retired. He was involved in racing. My father was involved. Neck breed.
And despite the information of the prior issues with your mother, does JR have a close relationship with his mother?
Very, yes.
Okay. Your mother and father, I don't know if you ever mentioned this before, your mother and father still married?
49 years. My mom takes and feeds him, diapers him, does everything for him.
Okay. And, okay. I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Do you have much on cross-examination?
Yeah, just
Okay,
one.
let's proceed.
Still, good morning, Ms. Wright.
Good morning.
Just want to talk about one of the issues Mr. Wood went through with you. Mr. Wood just asked you if you've ever seen violence towards your dad from your mom, and you indicated yes, correct? And are these just the two incidences that you recall?
That's the only ones I was ever witness to, yes.
Okay. And those instances, the first one you indicated was this one where you saw her take a baseball bat to your dad?
Yes.
Okay. And how old were you?
14.
Okay. And JR, I think you said he was 9?
He's about 9. We're between 4 and 5 years apart.
And you saw that, did that happen outside the house on the porch area or something?
No, it happened as soon as you come in the doorway, the steps, as soon as you come in, steps go up, and there's a hallway right here. It happened directly for the hallway.
Okay. And you said she hit him several times with a baseball bat?
Yes.
And both of you witnessed that?
Yes.
Okay. And then close in time to that, I guess she left the house after that?
She left to go stay with a friend for a few days.
Okay. And then you said she came back, and there was something about a knife, but can you kind of tell us what you
Well,
remember
it was
about that?
Thanksgiving, so we had a whole Thanksgiving spread on the table, and the formal dining room was directly in front of that hallway. You would come in the front door, there was a formal dining to the right, steps went up, and then the kitchen was in there, and then that hallway was here. And she had come in the front door, and Dad was telling her, "You're not coming in. You're not coming left. You're not coming back." And my mother said, "Oh, I'm seeing my children for Thanksgiving," and then grabbed a knife off the table.
Okay. And what did she do with that knife? Threaten?
She just threatened him.
Threaten him? Okay. And you guys, you all witnessed that?
Yes,
The defendant yourself,
yes.
Rhonda, other family members?
I don't think Rhonda was in there during that time. I didn't even know she was at the house yet at that time. Rhonda had already moved out of the home.
And Ms. Wright, do you previously recall testifying that you've never seen a physical fight between your parents?
I do not recall that. I'm not saying that, but I do not recall being asked that before now.
And do you recall when you gave a deposition in this case?
About 2 years ago?
Right, in 2016, does that sound right?
Yes, ma'am.
Myself was present, I believe Mr. Shoemaker was present. You recall
Yes,
that?
yes.
Okay. And just as you were today, you were placed under oath during that deposition and asked a lot of questions about your family and the incident, correct?
I recall, yes.
May I have a motion?
You may.
And just to be fair to you, if you would, for the record, we're on page 30. Read to yourself lines, there's a question on line 3 and on line 4 is your
Okay.
answer. Just read it to yourself and then I'll ask you if that refreshes your recollection. Alright. And you were asked in that deposition if you've ever seen a fight, either verbal or physical, and your response was, I've never seen a physical, correct?
Correct.
But now here today, you've told us about 2 physical, correct?
Correct.
At that time, in that deposition as well, you were asked if you ever seen your mother specifically hit your father, and your answer was that you had never witnessed that. Do you remember that?
Yes, but I believe the questions prior to that you asking me, those 2 questions were about domestic violence, which I did not consider domestic violence to take place in my home. And you also asked me, did I see my parents fight? And I said yes.
Okay. May I approach again, Judge?
You may.
Lines 14 and 15, same page. You actually continue, just read lines 4 through 15, that's your full answer. Just read that to yourself. Yeah, just to yourself.
Yes.
And in your answer, you stated at that time, but I've never seen my father hit my mother, and I've never seen my mother hit my father. Is that correct?
Yes, because we were speaking of a different incident that I was not present for
You say, I've never seen my mother hit my father.
in regards to that incident.
Okay, I'm not sure what incident you're talking about.
I'll read my statement if you would like me to. Because
No.
I mentioned specifically what situation I was referring to in that statement.
Okay.
And that I did not witness anything in that situation because that's what I'm happy to read it.
The question you were asked was not about a specific incident. The question I previously asked you.
And I understand what you're saying is then, but as I'm stating, what I was referring to was the incident in that statement that I refer to.
Right, which is a different incident that you didn't see.
I did not know you needed clarifying for my entire life.
Well, the question was, let me back up. I want to be fair. Earlier in that dialogue, you make a statement, they did fight, don't get me wrong. I asked the question, when you say fight, verbal or physical, and your response was, I've never seen physical. Is that correct? Based on
Correct,
what you
and
just
I
read.
wanted to talk about the incident. I had really at that moment forgotten about the incident before. There are literally times in my life where I've been told of multiple altercations between my parents. I have only witnessed one. And that's why I clarified the one that you were familiar with, and that's why I go into detail that I did not see any physical altercation.
Right, but today here in court, you testified as to 2.
On that 20 years earlier, yes.
Okay.
Any reader?
Just one question. Crystal, is it easy talking about these issues between your parents that occurred all those years ago?
No, it's not. And this is being, from what I understand, broadcast. So now everyone I know is going to know my family. I mean, it's been bad enough, but no. So there's a lot of details in my life that haven't been brought up or reminded of until I've been told I have to get in front of a court and tell everything about my family.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any recalls of that?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Very well. So sorry, excuse.
Yes, Your Honor.
Dave, she excused?
She is.
Right, you are excused. All right, folks, we're going to take our lunch break. Let me remind you to not discuss this case with anyone during the break. If you have any research of any type, to leave your notes here in the courtroom. It's 12:05, so let's plan on being back at 1:20. We'll be back in the hearing lounge at 1:20. We'll get started once we have everybody back. Enjoy your lunch. Everybody else, okay?